The day I accidentally sat in the wrong chair changed my entire life, and I didn't even know it until the man standing in front of me went completely still. Let me back up. I was 26 years old, working the morning shift at Hollow Creek Books, a used bookshop in the South End of Boston that smelled like old paper and someone's grandmother's attic, and I loved every single inch of it. The owner, Mr. Finch, had run the place for 32 years. He was 71, had a bad knee and a good heart, and he'd hired me fresh out of my undergraduate degree when nobody else would, because my major was English literature, and apparently the job market had not gotten that memo. The pay was $17 an hour. I supplemented it with a Saturday shift, waitressing at a brunch place 2 blocks over. Between the two, I covered my half of a 2-bedroom apartment in Dorchester that I split with my college roommate, paid my student loans on the minimum plan that would have me debt-free by approximately age 54, and ate a lot of pasta with canned sauce. This was my life, and honestly, I didn't hate it. I loved books, I loved the shop. I loved Mr. Finch, who called me kid, even though I had a bachelor's degree and strong opinions about Cormac McCarthy. What I did not love was the morning of October 14th, when I showed up 20 minutes early, because the tea was actually running on time for once. A miracle that happens roughly 3 times per calendar year in Boston. And the shop was still locked, and I had forgotten my umbrella, and it was raining. Not a drizzle. Real rain. The kind that soaks through your jacket inside of 30 seconds and makes your hair go flat and sad against your neck. There was a small alcove to the left of the bookshop entrance, the kind that used to be a doorway to something that no longer existed, just deep enough to keep one person out of the worst of the rain. I ducked into it, and that was when I noticed the single chair. It was not a normal chair. It was a dark green leather armchair, the kind you'd find in a private club or a very serious library, clearly out of place on a wet Boston sidewalk at 7:40 in the morning. Someone had put it there. It looked deliberate, not abandoned. And beside it on the ground sat a black leather bag, the expensive kind with no visible branding, the kind that announces its price by refusing to announce its label. The chair faced outward toward the street. No one was sitting in it. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds. The rain was not letting up. I looked up the street and then down the street. Not a soul. I looked at the chair. I looked at my soaking wet sneakers. I made the decision that I will spend some portion of my remaining years on this earth regretting, and the rest of them being grateful for. I sat down. I pulled the used copy of Donna Tartt's The Secret History out of my tote bag. I'd read it 4 times already. I was rereading it for reasons I couldn't fully explain, and I started reading, and for about 4 minutes I was perfectly happy. Dry-ish, absorbed in the first page. Rain drumming on the awning overhead, and then a shadow fell across the page. I looked up. The man standing in front of me was tall, not in an exaggerated way, but the kind of tall that takes up space before it even tries. He was wearing a charcoal wool coat that probably cost more than my monthly rent, dark trousers, no umbrella, and he was completely dry, which meant he'd arrived in a car and not walked through the rain like a normal person. He had dark hair, close cut, and a jaw that looked like it had been designed by someone with very strong opinions. He was somewhere in his mid-30s, and he was looking at me with an expression I couldn't immediately classify. Not anger exactly, but not nothing either. The kind of look that meant he was deciding something. "That's my chair," he said. His voice was low and even, the kind of voice that didn't need volume. I looked at the chair, I looked at him, I looked at the rain still falling beyond the alcove. And then, because I am who I am and I had not yet had coffee, and I'd been standing in the rain for 5 minutes before this, I said, "The bag doesn't have a name tag on it." A pause. "Neither does the chair," I added. Generally, in public, if you leave something unattended, it becomes available. Something shifted in his expression, just barely, like a door that opens half an inch and then stops. "It's not unattended," he said. I stepped away for 90 seconds. "Where did you go?" He looked at me for a long moment. "To get coffee." I processed this. "You left a leather chair and a very expensive bag unattended on a Boston sidewalk for 90 seconds to get coffee." "Yes, in the South End. I'm aware of where I am." I closed my book with one finger marking the page. I looked up at him again, this man in his perfect coat, standing in the rain that was beginning to hit his shoulders, because he was too tall to fit entirely under the awning's coverage, and something about the whole situation struck me as genuinely funny. Not mean funny, just absurd funny. The corner of my mouth went up before I could stop it. "I'll get up," I said. "I'm sorry. I genuinely didn't know it was taken." I stood, tucking the book back into my tote. He stepped aside to give me room, and as I stepped back out into the rain, not full on, I had the doorway of the bookshop now, which was marginally better. I heard him say, behind me, in that same even voice, "You can stay." I turned around. He was sitting down in the chair now. His coffee cup, I noticed, was nowhere to be seen. He'd left it somewhere, or maybe he hadn't gotten it yet after all. His hands were resting on the armrests, and he was looking at me with that same unreadable expression. "I have room for one person in this alcove," he said. "You can stand here, out of the rain." "That's a very strange offer from a stranger," I said. "You're right. Feel free to decline." I stood there for a moment. The rain fell. The morning smelled like wet concrete in autumn, and then I stepped back under the awning and stood to his right, not quite in the alcove but close enough, and I opened my book again. We didn't speak for the next 7 minutes. And then Mr. Finch arrived, flustered and apologetic, and unlocked the door, and I went inside. I did not learn his name that morning. I did not ask. He did not offer. I filed the whole encounter under weird things that happen in this city and went about my day. He came back 4 days later, not to the alcove. He came into the bookshop at 9:15 in the morning, wearing a different coat, navy this time, and he walked with the kind of deliberate stillness that makes other people move out of the way without being asked. He didn't browse. He went straight to the front desk where I was cataloging new arrivals, and he set a coffee cup on the counter in front of me. I stared at it. "You didn't have coffee that morning," he said. "I noticed." I looked up at him. "How did you know I work here?" "The bookshop was what you were waiting for, and you had a key in your hand when you left." I had. I was usually the one who opened on Thursdays when Mr. Finch had his early morning physical therapy. "That's a little observant," I said. "Occupational habit," he said. I waited for him to explain what his occupation was. He didn't. I picked up the coffee. It was from the good place 2 streets over, the one I never went to because their small was $4.50, and I had a budget. I took a sip. It was exactly how I would have ordered it if someone had asked, which no one had. A little sweet, a splash of something that tasted like cardamom. "How did you know how I take it?" I said. "I guessed." "That's a very good guess. I'm good at reading people," he said. And then, with almost no transition at all, as if it were the same conversation, "My name is Cole Whitfield Marin," I said. "Marin Voss." Something about the way he said his name made me think that he expected me to recognize it. I didn't, not right away. Cole Whitfield was not a name I had filed away anywhere. I would learn later that this was unusual. Most people, when introduced to Cole Whitfield, knew exactly who he was. He came back the next week, and the week after that, always in the morning. He never bought anything the first several visits. He'd stand at the front desk and we'd talk, or something that resembled talking, which mostly meant that I talked. And he listened with an attention that was slightly unnerving, the kind of focused attention you don't often get from another human being. He asked questions, not personal ones, not prying ones. He asked about the books, which titles moved quickly, which ones sat for months, what I recommended to people who said they wanted something different. He had opinions which surprised me, sharp ones. He'd read more than I expected. By the 4th visit, he started buying things. First editions, mostly, which is how I finally started to understand that the number on the price tags did not concern him at all. Mr. Finch nearly wept. By the 6th visit, I had started looking forward to 9:15. By the 8th, I was thinking about him at home. I told my roommate, Keely, about him one night over the pasta I was making, because it was my turn to cook. I said there was this man who came into the shop. I said he was hot? Keely said. I was going to say interesting. Can both be true? Both were true. I didn't say that. What I said was, there's something about him I can't figure out. I was stirring the sauce when I said it. He's very contained, like he's managing something underneath, all the time. Keely looked at me over her wine glass. Marin, you've been describing this man for 5 minutes without saying one concrete detail about what he actually does. I don't know what he does, I said. Did you ask? I thought about it. He said occupational habit. When I asked why he was so observant, that's not an answer, Keely said. No, I said. It's not. I found out who Cole Whitfield was on a Tuesday in November, And I found out the way you find out things you weren't trying to know. By accident, Mr. Finch called me into the back office that afternoon, looking the way he did, when something had upset him. Not panicked, just quietly troubled, the way a man who has survived a great deal of things looks when something new arrives. He showed me a letter. It was from a property development company, formally typed, polite in the way that legal language is polite when it is preparing to deliver bad news. The building that housed Hollow Creek Books. The whole building, which also held a tailor's shop and a small framing gallery on the other floors, had been purchased. The new owner intended to redevelop the property. Current tenants would be offered a 90-day notice period in the new year. The company name on the letterhead was Whitfield Capital Group. I stood there holding the letter for a long moment. "You know the name?" Mr. Finch asked. "I think so," I said. "I think I might." I went home that night and I did the search I should have done weeks ago. Cole Whitfield. Whitfield Capital Group. Private equity, commercial real estate, a portfolio that apparently included half a dozen neighborhoods across Boston and more in New York and Chicago. Not tech money. Old money, or at least money so thoroughly established that it looked like old money. The Google results were not extensive. No social media presence, no interviews. A handful of mentions in real estate trade publications and one brief profile in a Boston Business Journal piece from 3 years prior. In the photo that accompanied that piece, he looked exactly as he did in person. Contained, managing something. He was, by the article's estimation, 38. He ran Whitfield Capital largely out of the public eye. He was known in the industry for being effective and for being difficult to negotiate with. I put my phone face down on the kitchen counter and sat there for a while. He had never told me. That much was clear. He had been coming into the bookshop that he was in the process of effectively shutting down, buying first editions, asking me about the inventory, and he had told me his name but nothing else. Whether that was deliberate or simply an omission, I didn't know. I wasn't sure it mattered. The result was the same. When he came in that Thursday morning at 9:15, I was ready. I let him get to the counter. I let him set his coffee. He'd started bringing 2, 1 for me, which I'd started accepting without comment, because the September version of me would have refused, and the November version of me had apparently lost the ability to say no. To cardamom coffee from a man with dark eyes. And then I turned from the shelf I was pretending to organize, and I looked at him. "Whitfield Capital Group," I said. He didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He looked at me with that same steady expression and said, "Yes, you bought this building. Yes, you've been coming in here for 8 weeks. Yes." I looked at him. Something was burning in my chest. Not quite anger, or not only anger, something more complicated, because I had spent 8 weeks finding this man interesting, and now I was looking at the letter in my head, the 90 days, Mr. Finch's face. "Did you know?" I said. "When you came in the first time, when you brought me the coffee, did you already own this building?" A pause. Short but there. "The purchase closed the Monday before I first came in," he said. So yes, he had known. He had known, and he had still come in and asked me about books and brought me coffee and learned to guess how I took it. "Then I think," I said carefully, "that you should probably not come back." He looked at me for a long moment. Something moved across his face that I was not expecting. Something that looked almost like uncertainty, which didn't fit the image I'd assembled of him at all. "I understand," he said, and he left. The month that followed was the kind of month that makes you understand why people say hard things build character. Because there is no other reason to explain why difficult things keep existing. Mr. Finch got the official notice. He told me with the same quiet dignity he brought to everything. He was 71 with a bad knee, and he had been in this building for 32 years, and he said he supposed it was time, which I knew was not what he actually felt. The tailor on the second floor, Mr. Obie, who had been there for 20 years, and whose daughter came in on Saturdays to help him, got the same letter. The gallery owner, a woman named Petra, who actually had been there for 32 years alongside Mr. Finch, and who made him tea when his knee was bad, got the letter too. I did not hear from Cole Whitfield, which was what I had asked for, so I told myself I wasn't thinking about it. I was mostly successful. I thought about it approximately every 3rd day, which in December, which has 31 days, worked out to thinking about it roughly 10 times, each one briefer than the last, which I told myself was progress. I threw myself into work. We started a clearance sale, though the word clearance felt cruel. We labeled it moving on sale, and a lot of the regulars came in and bought things they probably didn't need. Mostly, I think, because they wanted to be present for the last days of something they loved. Which is a very human thing to want, and also a very sad one. 2 weeks before Christmas, I was shelving the morning arrivals. We were still getting inventory. Mr. Finch had not lost hope even now, which said more about him than anything else. When the door opened and Cole walked in, I heard him before I saw him, which is embarrassing to admit. I recognized his footsteps, the particular cadence of a person who moves with intention. I turned around with a book in each hand and I looked at him, and I didn't say anything because I wasn't sure what was appropriate. He looked different, not in an obvious way. Same coat. Not the one from October, a different one, darker. Same composed expression. But there was something careful about the way he came to the counter, like he had rehearsed what he meant to say, and was not entirely confident in the rehearsal. He put something on the counter, a folder. "I'd like you to look at this," he said. "Cole, please." It was the first time I'd heard him say please in a way that actually meant please, rather than as a formality. I set the books down, I opened the folder. It was a development plan, but not the one I'd been imagining. The ground floor of the building, the footprint where Hollow Creek Books currently existed, was marked on the plans as Retail Preserve. The annotations detailed a proposal to deed the space at below market rate to a cultural institution or independent business for a term of 20 years, with renewal options. There was a notation attached with Mr. Finch's name on it, not his legal name, his first name, Raymond, which I had only learned after 3 months. Attached to a proposed agreement that would let him operate the shop rent-free for the remainder of his desired tenure, with an endowment to sustain it afterward. I read the whole thing twice. My heart was doing something irregular. "When did you?" I started. "October," he said. I started revising the plan in October. October. The month he'd started coming in, the month of the coffee and the books, and the questions about the inventory. He'd been changing the plan while he was coming to understand what he'd be destroying if he didn't. "Why?" I said. It came out quieter than I intended. Cole was quiet for a moment. He was looking at me the way he'd looked at me in the alcove that first morning, like he was deciding something, like the decision cost him something. "Because I met someone," he said, "who made me look at what I was doing differently." The shop was very quiet. Outside, December was gray and cold, and the street was starting to fill up with morning commuters. Inside, it smelled like old books and the space heater mister. Finch ran near his desk and faintly, like the coffee I'd made that morning before opening. "The flashing lights in here are terrible, by the way," I said, "because my brain does this, lands on something ridiculous in moments of high emotion to buy itself time." He blinked. "What?" "Nothing. Sorry." I closed the folder. "Cole, this is a significant thing. Yes, this costs you something." The South End portfolio was already underperforming certain projections. The cultural anchor model has a documented positive effect on surrounding property values. It's not entirely altruistic. "You're explaining your emotions with real estate economics," I said. Something happened to his mouth. The smallest shift, barely visible, but I had spent 8 weeks cataloging his expressions and I knew what it meant. "I'm more comfortable with numbers," he said. I noticed. He looked at me. Outside, the first real snow of the year had started to fall. Fat, slow flakes struck the window glass and didn't immediately melt. I watched him not look at it. "I'm not good at this," he said. "At whatever this is." "I know," I said. "For what it's worth, I'm not great at it either. I've been thinking about you every third day for a month and calling it an improvement." He looked at me, and then, for the first time, the only time in all the weeks I had known him, Cole Whitfield smiled. It was a small smile, startled, almost like it had happened without full permission. But it was there, and it was real, and it changed his face entirely. "Every third day," he said. "Don't read too much into the frequency," I said. The months that followed were not without difficulty, because real things aren't. There were people in Cole's world who didn't understand what he was doing. With the building, with his time, with me. His general counsel, a sharp, humorless man named Frank, called the revised plan a liability and told me so directly once, in a parking garage, in a conversation that was not intended to be comfortable. Cole found out about that conversation within 24 hours, and had a different conversation with Frank that I was not present for, and Frank subsequently ceased being direct with me about anything. There was a period in February when Cole pulled back, not gone, but more distant, distracted in a way that felt different from his usual contained quality. I found out later, not from him, that there had been a situation. Someone from a competing group, a man named Alec Drummond, who had history with Whitfield Capital, that predated anything I knew about, had been quietly building a case with the DA's office around some older transactions, real ones and fabricated ones mixed together in a way that was designed to be difficult to sort. It was the kind of trouble that didn't announce itself loudly and had to be managed quietly, and Cole managed it quietly, in the way that he managed everything, which meant I watched it in the shape of his shoulders, and the slightly later times he texted back, and the evenings he arrived at my apartment with that distant look, and just sat on the couch with me, without explanation. I let him. I didn't push. I am an English major who has read a significant number of novels about what happens when you push people before they're ready. One night in late March, after the situation had resolved in a way that I understood only broadly, he told me about it. We were in the kitchen in my apartment in Dorchester. I still had the apartment in Dorchester. I liked Dorchester. I had become fond of the particular texture of my life there, and I was making the pasta I'd been making since college, because I'd never actually improved the recipe, and Cole had stopped pretending he needed better food, because there is something clarifying about being with someone who feeds you what they actually make. He told me about Drummond, about the investigation, about the months before October, when things had been complicated in ways that had made him more closed off than usual, more cold, more willing to look at a block of buildings in the South End and see a spreadsheet instead of 30 years of someone's life. And then you were sitting in my chair, he said, your unmarked, unattended chair. Yes, and you decided to let me stay in the rain anyway, I said. You were very composed for someone who was clearly soaked through. I was performing composure, I said. Internally, I was mortified. I couldn't tell, he said. That was the point, I said. He was quiet for a moment. He was doing the thing he did when he was about to say something that mattered, which I now recognized as a particular kind of stillness, slightly different from his baseline stillness. An additional quality of attention turned inward. I've been thinking, he said, about the building. The building's good, I said. Mr. Finch told me last week that his January numbers were better than any January he can remember. He thinks the publicity around the cultural anchor plan brought people in. The building is good, he agreed. I was thinking about the apartment above the shop. 3rd floor. It's been empty since I bought the building. He looked at me. It's a good space, good light, a lot of room for books. I put down the wooden spoon I was holding. I looked at him. He was looking back at me with the same expression he'd had the day he brought me the folder, that same careful composure over something that wasn't composed at all. Cole Whitfield, I said. Are you asking me to move? I'm suggesting there's available space, he said, with a 20-year term and very favorable conditions. You're negotiating my apartment like a commercial lease. I'm more comfortable with numbers, I said. I know. I picked the spoon back up. The sauce was going to stick if I left it. I stirred it for a moment, thinking, and then I said, What's the rent? Negotiable, he said. I'd consider a trade in kind. What kind? He was quiet for a moment. Someone who makes me look at things differently, he said. Someone who reads in the rain. Someone who, in my experience, is very hard to find. The kitchen was warm. The snow outside had been gone for 2 weeks, but the air still had that particular cool that Boston holds until it finally decides to let go of winter, which it does only reluctantly and only in late April. The pasta was almost done. My apartment was small, and the rent was too high, and Keeley had been talking about moving to Portland, and I had been thinking about what came next for approximately 4 months. I looked at him. He was watching me with that attention that had unsettled me in October, and by December had started to feel like something I didn't want to live without. I have a lot of books, I said. I know, he said. I've seen your apartment. Like, a lot of books, Marin, he said, my name in his voice. Just like that, no inflection, just the shape of it, had been doing something to my chest since November. I bought a building with a bookshop in it. I'm aware of your relationship with books, I laughed. I didn't mean to, or I didn't plan to, but it came out anyway, genuine and a little relieved. And he looked at me when I laughed with that expression he got sometimes. The one that I had slowly come to understand meant that I had given him something he didn't have a category for yet. Something that he was adding to a collection of things he was only beginning to know he'd been missing. "Okay," I said. "Tell me about the light." "East-facing," he said immediately. "Good morning light. The original floors are intact. They're good, solid wood. There's a window seat in the second room that I think was probably built for exactly what you would use it for." "You've thought about this," I said. "I think about most things," he said. "Every third day?" I said. And there it was again, that small, startled smile, the one that happened without full permission. "More frequently than that," he said. "I moved into the apartment above Hollow Creek Books on a Saturday in May, with the help of Keeley and Mr. Finch's nephew and 2 men Cole sent, who were extremely efficient and did not comment on the volume of boxes labeled books, non-negotiable. The window seat in the second room was exactly what he'd described. A deep, cushioned alcove with east-facing light that turned gold in the mornings, just right for reading. I put a worn quilt on it that I'd had since college. I put the Donna Tartt on the small shelf beside it, the same copy I'd been holding the morning I sat in the wrong chair. Mr. Finch came up to see it that afternoon, moving slowly with his cane, and he stood in the doorway and looked at the room and said, "Well, kid, you landed all right. I sat in the wrong chair," I said. He patted my shoulder. "Funny how that works," he said. Cole came by that evening after the chaos had settled, after Keeley had gone and Mr. Finch had gone, and the apartment was mine in the quiet way that a space becomes yours when everyone else leaves, and you're standing in it alone for the first time. He knocked, which he didn't have to do. He owned the building, but he knocked, which told me something. The same way all the small things about him told me something. I opened the door. He was holding 2 cups of coffee, the good kind, from 2 streets over. A little sweet, a splash of cardamom. "You guessed again," I said. "I've been right before," he said. I stepped back and let him in, and he came through the door into the apartment that smelled like old books and the May evening coming through the open window. And he stood there, looking at everything I'd made of the space in one day. The books on the shelves, the quilt on the window seat, the particular organized chaos of a life in process, and whatever he was thinking, he kept it in the contained way he kept most things, but his shoulders were different, easier. Like something he'd been managing had, for the moment, stopped needing to be managed. I took the coffee from him. I went to sit on the window seat. After a moment he followed. Outside, the city was going about its business in the particular warm way it does in May, when Boston finally accepts that winter is over and acts almost surprised by its own beauty. The trees on the street below were full and green, and the light was going amber at the edges, and somewhere down the block someone was playing music that floated up in fragments, there and gone. "How's the light?" he said. "Perfect," I said. He nodded once, like something had been confirmed, and he sat beside me in the window seat, and we drank our coffee and watched the city, and didn't say anything for a while, which is its own kind of language, the kind you learn slowly, with someone, over months of paying attention, until the silence between you isn't empty at all, but full of every small thing you've come to know about each other. That morning in October, I sat in the wrong chair. Every single good thing that came after started there.